Hey guys, Rybaack here and welcome to the 5th tank guide from the Short Bus Riders. The 5th out of 6 tank will be one that I had benched for the entire expansion until now. The Vengeance Demon Hunter. So, as I was gearing this tune to make the guide series, I actually found this to be a lot of fun, like, for real actually. This is one of the more fun tanks in my opinion. However, for raiding, it's not that good if you're looking for a raiding, for raid tanking. But for Mythic Plus, it is absolutely one of the more powerful tanks. So if you're looking to do Mythic Plus as a tank, I recommend this Demon Hunter for sure. And you're about to see what's going on with that. But before we begin, again, I'm going to go over the basics once again. Again, don't get hit in the back. Make sure you have the most threat if you're supposed to be tanking at that moment, or tanking at all since in Mythic Plus, whatever. Just make sure you have more threat than the DPS. Shouldn't be a problem. Really, with this tank, the issue should really have no problems with threat issues. The only threat issues you should ever have on this tank is having too much. So, with the Vengeance Demon Hunter, there's really only one build there, like, at all. One of the lines is interchangeable between talents, the Sigil line. But everything else is pretty straightforward. Abyssal Strike is pretty straightforward, where your Infernal Strike, which is a big bouncy. With Abyssal Strike, you get more range on it, and the cooldown's reduced by 8 seconds. You really want this for the mobility, plus a little bit of damage. It's just the go-to for at least the mobility aspect. Agonizing Flames, Immolation Aura increases your movement speed and deals 20% increased damage. If you're looking for extra damage, like you feel like you're not putting out enough already, this is okay, but you're gonna be putting out plenty of damage already. Razor Spikes, while your demon spikes are active, you deal more damage and your melee attacks snare targets by 50%. This is more utility. This one does have some play, but your general go-to is gonna be the Abyssal Strike due to the extra mobility and less cooldown of it. Yeah, because your Abyssal Strike, it's really your big go-to for mobility, and it actually does some damage. Plus, it synergizes with a different talent later. And the second line is Fallout. That's gonna be your go-to, because Immolation's Aura Initial Burst, the initial explosion, is gonna have a chance to generate soul fragments upon hitting targets, and you need those soul fragments for a pretty big reason. The more of those you can get out, the better. That's why Fallout's a good talent here. Feast of Souls is absolutely garbage because the button Soul Cleave, which is this one, you should almost never press ever at all, regardless of literally everything. If you're a self-healing tank, but this is not how you do it. It works kind of like a Death Strike. It works kind of like Consumption actually, except the Soul Cleave except the Soul Cleave is actually useless, as it is way too expensive of a friggin' button to hit. Costs up to 50 pain just to get a super underwhelming number of healing. So when it comes to the self-healing, you're going to rely on a different talent later. So Feast of Souls is the worst talent here. Burning Alive does have a little bit of use. It has more use than Feast of Souls, because it makes your Fiery Brand do more damage, which your Fiery Brand also happens to be a defensive cooldown at the same time. So Burning Alive has more play than Feast of Souls, but Fallout's your general go-to. It's because your Immolation Aura, which has a very short cooldown, is already generating more fragments, which can be used for a later talent. Flame Crash is your go-to for the third line. This is why you want Abyssal Strike, because it creates a Sigil of Flame when you land. It makes an explosive dealio, doing some fire damage. It pretty much makes a Sigil of Flame on every single Infernal Strike you do. Like so. That's why Flame Crash synergizes with Abyssal Strike, because of Sigil of Flame. Fellblade was one that I used to use a little bit before, just to generate more pain. It's pretty much a basic hit, making your Shear have a chance to reset this button's cooldown, generating more pain. If you're having trouble with pain generation, this is pretty okay. Fell Eruption is just completely useless though. Do not use Fell Eruption ever. I'd say I recommend Flame Crash, but if you feel the need for extra pain generation, Fell Blade. But I'm gonna go with Flame Crash on this one. Fracture. On the 4th line, this is this is button number 2 of your 3-button rotation. Shear is number 1. And then Fracture is your spender. It pretty much does its damage and shatters 2 fragments from your target. Again, you want soul fragments to be shattered. You want more fragments. So this is really good. Feed the demon. It consumes a soul fragment to reduce the cooldown of Demon Spike instead. You don't really need to use Demon Spikes at like 100% of the time, so this talent's not that good, considering you're not going to have a lot of uptime on Demon Spikes, only as a major emergency. It's like the one active mitigation you don't need all the time. So Feed the Demon doesn't really see much play. Soul Rending does see a little bit of play, because while your Metamorphosis is up, you get up to 50% leech, which is actually kind of a lot. As a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you can actually proc a short duration Metamorphosis without triggering the cooldown. There's a chance of that. During that Metamorphosis, you can have the leech. During the regular one, you can have the leech. During the Cheat Death one, you can have the leech. This one sees a little bit of play, but your general go-to is going to be Fracture due to the generation of fragments. For the next line, this is really the only line that's really interchangeable. I personally run Sigil of Chains for Mythic Plus or fights that need a grip, like Portal Keeper, Coven, fights like that. This is my general go-to for Mythic Plus, as you become the only other tank with a mass grip other than Blood Decay. But Concentrated Sigils also sees play because it makes all your sigils be targeted at your location with more of an increased duration, which is pretty good. However, I did find a macro given to me by someone from Unholy Legion, which is a guild on my server, that makes my Sigil of Chains basically do its effect while doing Concentrated Sigils. Because normally, when you press the button, you just kind of have a little targety thing. But if I use the macro, it just sets it there immediately. Almost as if I already have Concentrated Sigils while running Sigil of Chains at the same time. Which is honestly pretty nice, because I don't even have to spec into this at all, ever, because of this macro that I have with Sigil of Chains. I don't really run Quicken Sigils though, because I haven't had much use of the Silence and Misery yet. I will, probably. But I've been using Sigil of Chains for the Mythic Plus. The 6th line, there's only one go-to. Spirit Bomb. This is the self-heal that I was talking about that you'll be using. What imagine that Soul Cleave is not the self-heal to use, Spirit Bomb is. Because for one, it's AoE. This is what consumes the fragments to do the self-healing. And since it happens in AoE up to 40-yard range, it can reach a friggin' hunter's range, which is crazy. And a mage's range, yeah. That's pretty impressive. Like, it's busted for damage and busted for survivability. Blade turning is not that great because you have to parry for it to work. Instead of doing something crazy, it just increases pain generation, which you already get plenty of. Sometimes I have a hard time keeping it spent, so this talent does not work for me. Fell Devastation is what I used to use at first before I figured out about Spirit Bomb, but it's not that great because it's a 1-minute cooldown, and it spends 30 pain to do a little bit of healing. But Spirit Bomb's better because not only does it reach a whole 40 yards, but it does a lot more damage and does a lot more healing. So I would take Spirit Bomb, as this is the only good talent on the line. The 110 line, this one has proven interchangeable depending on your situation. I've seen Mythic Raiders actually swap this out for the other two. I've seen all the uses for all 3 of these, but my personal go-to, as I'm a rookie Demon Hunter, is Last Resort. That's the cheat death. When you are supposed to die, it lets you go into Metamorphosis instead of dying, and returns you to 30% health for you to do the Metamorphosis type effect. Long cooldown of only 8 minutes, but if you're a rookie Demon Hunter who's not sure if they'll be able to stay alive, I'd take Last Resort. When you become an expert, you can consider other ones, like Demonic Infusion has its uses. Like if you want, because what this does, instead of you spending 60 pain to use your charge of the Demon Spikes, it lets you generate 60 pain by spending them all and refilling. But you have to use this button, which is probably not that bad. But obviously, I'm not an expert enough to really use this yet. And Soul Barrier is just basically a shield. So you spend some pain, and you give yourself a 1.1 million damage shield. And when you consume Soul Fragments, it adds a little bit to the shield. But I use Last Resort as not only am I a rookie, but I feel like a cheap Death Metamorphosis is just that much better for me anyway. So this is my general setup. See, even though it's not as diverse as the other tanks, it's probably the least diverse tank when it comes to talents. At least the build that it's stuck with is actually really powerful, unlike the Warrior. But that's pretty much that. Now let's take a look at the stat priority, shall we? Okay, so this one I had to grab from my Guildmaster because as the Demon Hunter is my least played tank ever, even less than the 6th tank that's gonna be out. I actually had to talk to my Guildmaster / raid leader about this one. So when it comes to stat priority, I wasn't sure what to do with it, but after asking him and discussing with him, this is the information he gave me. If you're looking to do extra damage, you're gonna want crit, then about 20% haste, and then versatility, and then mastery. The crit, obviously doing more damage and increasing and doing all that, which I'm kind of running as a DPS tank on the Demon Hunter, because since the Demon Hunter is the jack of all trades but a master of none, they can actually get away with doing a crap ton of damage while still self-healing like crazy. Because they already know they're never going to out-heal a Blood DK. At least if the Blood DK knows what he's doing. If you grab two equally skilled players of these two classes, the Blood DK would probably heal more. Which, Demon Hunters don't really mind that, usually. But if you're looking to stay alive more, you would put crit at the bottom instead, and you would put versatility and mastery at the top. Versatility, mastery, the 20% haste, and then the crit. I'm kind of set up as an offensive tank, just because that's just how I still have in the gear. But that's pretty much all I really know. I can't go too deep into what the stats do too much, other than just reading it. Like mastery lets my demons interact with my demon spikes. Haste just attack speed. Crit's obviously damage. Versatility is the mitigation stat, you know. Avoidance is kind of important as a Demon Hunter tank, but it's not like the be all and end all. But so the stat priority section's pretty short. Now let's look at trinkets next. So trinkets are a really complicated section of the Demon Hunter. They can use a lot. They can use just about any tank trinket. I still haven't had the LFR friggin' dog trinket, because I've yet to get good trinkets. The Rift World is pretty good because of the crit for the DPS stat priority. Apocalypse Drive is good because of the mitigation aspect. Armor on the Demas. Smorning Titan Guard's good for any tank. And then the Pantheon Trinket's actually worthwhile using. But there's also some DPS trinkets they could use too if they want. Let's look into Havoc. If they really wanted to, they could probably get away with using Gorshalak's Legacy. And maybe the, oh, I'm in LFR. There we go. They could probably get away with the Golganeth's Vitality even as well. If you have Thules, that's what you should use at all times anyway. But they can actually get away with some of the DPS trinkets, because as they're a DPS tank, if you're not looking, like, if you don't need to stay alive, like if it's on farm and you know you're gonna live, you could get away with the DPS trinket, probably. But obviously I recommend tank trinkets usually as a tank. When it comes to set bonuses, your 2 set bonus and 4 sets, they have their uses. Like your 2 set, while Demon Spikes is up, your parry chance is increased by 5%. That's obviously good. You'd probably want at least the 2 set. And then the 4 set is when you parry, the cooldown of Metamorphosis is reduced by 5 seconds, which is pretty busted if you feel you're using Metamorphosis a lot. So I'd say go for at least the 2 set. The 4 set is a little bit more optional. So with trinkets, it's not too strict. Dark Moon deck is strong. Smoldering Titan Guard is strong. Almond Duels is probably the best you can get. They're not so strict on their trinkets. But let's now go over the Legendaries. So with Vengeance Legendaries, there's not really much about them that I can really say much of. I can just mostly say if it's good or bad. Like Prydaz, not that good. Just like the stats are pretty good on it, but the shield is. But again, you're a tank. This particular shield is not good because you can't even control when it's up. See, as a Demon Hunter tank, you actually need to be able to control when your defensives are up, and a Prydaz doesn't let you do that. The fact that this shield is uncontrollable is what makes it not so good. If you wanted a shield like this, I would recommend Archimons instead. But moving on, the Rune Master's Pauldrons. Metamorphosis resets the remaining cooldown of all your sigils and empower wards, and granting you charged demon spikes. This is good for survivability. This is actually really good for survivability, I'd say. I don't know if I can call it best in slot just yet, but I'm gonna call it a pretty good legendary until I know more. The Cloak of Fell Flames. This one's pretty alright. Haste versatility. You take 15 reduced magic damage when Immolation Aura is active. In a magic heavy fight, this would be really strong, like Covenant Shavara, Dogs, because your Immolation Aura is part of your DPS burst anyway. So you'd be getting a defensive against magic while trying to go big dick DPS. So if you're looking to stay alive and do that at the same time, this is a pretty good one for magic fights. The Wrist, absolutely useless except for the avoidance on it. The Haste and Mastery is okay, the avoidance makes it okay, but the equip effect is completely useless. Soul Cleave reduces the remaining cooldown on the random sigil. See, it's a random sigil too. It could be one you don't even want. And the fact that it's Soul Cleave, a button you don't even press, you're not even getting this equip effect at all. So it's like, why even use it? I'm stuck with it because it's one of the only 2 legendaries I have. As soon as I get a third, I'm getting the fuck rid of this thing. Spirit of the Darkness Flame, the hands. Your fiery brand now heals you for 100% of the damage done, and each enemy hit by your Sigil of Flame increases the next instant damage of your next fiery brand. Attack it 15 times. This is good for. This has a good balance legendary. I say balance as in survivability and damage. If you're looking for a balance, this can work for some situations. I'm not going to call it a best in slot though. Synodaria the Symbiote. This is the Fire Starter legendary for leather wearers. Monks can use it, rogues can use it, druids can use it, demon hunters can use it. Again, just like on the druid video, this is the Fire Starter legendary if you're looking for a starting burst. This can give it. Oblivion's Embrace. This is what I would call a best in slot survival legendary, because it gives versatility mastery, which is the best in slot stats for survivability, and it gives you a charge of, and it lets you have an extra charge of both demon spikes and power wards, which one is a physical defense and the other one's magic. It's giving you an extra charge of both kinds. This is really good. So if you're looking to stay alive, this is the legendary I recommend. The Shoes, the instant initial damage from your Immolation Aura reduces the remaining cooldown on fiery burn by 2 seconds. This is okay. You could get some use out of this for both as a balance legendary. I'm not gonna call it a best in slot though. especially since I'm not an expert with the class just yet. Crafted Legendary, not that good. Only thing you can really do with it is just sock it 600 into one stat. Sophus probably has its uses, but it's not as good of a ring as others. If you were stuck with rings, I would recommend literally the other two instead of this one. One of them being the Fragment of the Betrayer's Prison. Critical Strike Mastery with a socket. While your Demon Spikes is active, you have 15% leech, which is basically when you have your physical defensive up, you're getting a lot more leech, which you obviously want. Soul of the Slayer, you're getting Fallout when you use it. That's one of your go-to talents, so if you're stuck with this ring, then you could combo Fallout with Burning Alive. Again, Feast of Souls sucks, so just go with Burning Alive if you have the Soul of the Slayer and you're stuck with it, or you're just using it. Insignia of the Grand Army, it's an okay for a first legendary. However, with the Demon Hunter tank, I've actually seen a good use of this legendary. Because for relics, this is something I always forget to go over on all the tanks. There's only really one good relic slot, and that's called Fiery Demise. Do I have any of those on my weapon? Yeah, I do. Fiery Brand also increases fire damage you deal to that target by whatever %. Which means the more of those you have, the stronger your Fiery Brand. And then with this legendary, your Fiery Brand becomes even stronger, making it an insane cooldown. So this legendary actually makes Fiery Brand quite powerful. So even though it's just a starter legendary, Vengeance Demon Hunters actually have a really good use of it. So this is not a bad one. Archimonde's Hatred Reborn. If you had to have a shield, I recommend this over Pride's because it's controllable. And you can actually control the strength of it too, just like you can in the Blood Decay. Which, not that Pride's can't do that, but you can at least have even more control with Archimonde. Amethyll's Vision, all the stats, has all the crazy shit on it. If you get this, just use it. There's like nothing to debate. And now for the last part of this guide, the rotation. Okay, now for the last part of this guide, the rotation. There is a bit of a rotation, kind of. It's mostly just priority. It's a priority rotation. But I'll start off with my average opener, without cooldowns. So I would use the Infernal Strike to leap in, and then I would shear. This is a non-bursty rotation, a standard rotation. I'd go in with Infernal Strike, and then I'd use shear until I can fracture, and then either use and maintain that until I get at least 4 or 5 soul fragments. And then when I get 4 or 5 soul fragments, I Spirit Bomb. That's pretty much it. That's a non-bursty standard rotation. I'll show you. So I just prioritize the shear to generate the pain, and then I would use Fracture to spend it, and then when I get to the right amount, Spirit Bomb. Oh hey, I procced. Again, there is that chance of using the Metamorphosis proc, which is pretty good. But now I'm going to go back here. That's a standard rotation. That's without cooldowns. That's a non-bursty rotation. Your burst rotation does add in some buttons. So for your bursty rotation, you would set your Sigil Flame up there first, and then when like at about 2 seconds before the fight starts, and then you would Infernal Strike onto your target to do that again. But while you're in mid-air, you would hit Fiery Brand, applying the brand which also does damage while taking that defensive so you don't die on pull. and then I would use Soul Carver to generate the fragments instantly. Actually, no. Okay, messed up my words there. So you'd use the Sigil, Infernal Strike, Fiery Brand Midair, Immolation Aura, and then Soul Carver to generate the fragments, and then Spirit Bomb. If you feel the need, you can pop your Horn of Valor Trinket if you have that or whatever. But this is basically how the burst would go. Let me just cancel this. So there's that. And then of course, and then you do the priority rotation. Use Immolation Aura on cooldown, and if there's a lot of physical damage going out, raise your spikes as your active mitigation. If magic's about to go out, empower wards. So it's pretty much use Immolation Aura on cooldown, use Sigil of Flame on cooldown, use the Sigil of Chains to grip, either set the location or use the macro to set it at your own location, basically giving you concentrated sigils without actually needing the talent. I can put that macro in the description below too. Use Soul Carver to generate more fragments, another Spirit Bomb, another Immolation Aura. I get another Spirit Bomb, Sigil of Flames, Fiery Brand. Fiery Brand is more of a defensive anyway, so so you should be using it to stay alive, since it only does one thing of damage. But yeah, it's pretty much a priority system. There's that. Soul Carver, Sigil of Flame on cooldown, Immolation Aura on cooldown. I'm not even that well geared at this time yet, so my DPS isn't even that great. But with this general rotation, you should be doing a decent amount of damage, especially when you get more geared. This would really give you a lot of damage on trash, because it's pretty much an AoE rotation. I haven't really done too much different with a single target rotation at all, considering the Spirit Bomb is still just as powerful. And that's pretty much it. I just have to gear this character a little bit more, and then after I finally get this character settled in, I only have one tank guide to make left, and that is the Protection Paladin. The Paladins would probably be sitting here either getting mad, probably, or be saying, you saved the best for last. We got some good Paladins. I trust them. I trust them pretty good. But that pretty much concludes the Vengeance Demon Hunter guide from my point of view. Again, I'm not a complete expert, so this is not completely... like, this is not my main. This is actually my newest alt. Until the Paladin gets geared. I'm going to try to gear that Paladin first. Can't show off a Paladin guide without actually having gear on the Paladin. Now, what would be the point in that? So I'm going to try to focus on the Paladin, and then get that guide out for you next. And then my next project will then begin. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again. Have a good night.